My dear Masala Podcast fans, I've written a book called Bad Daughter. You surprised by the title? I think not. I've never shared such deeply personal things before. I talk about growing up in poverty. I talk about my father's violence, my mother's murder. I talk about how I turned my pain into power, navigating mental health, sexuality, spirituality, and patriarchy. Bad Daughter is my story of going from Mumbai's slums to New York's billboards. But it's your story too. What's the message of this book? It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what happened to you. You still get to have the life that you want. If you're looking for a book to move you and inspire you to change your life, type in Bad Daughter by Sangeeta Pillai on Amazon or go to my website baddaughter.co.uk.
Besharam, Badtameez, Chee.
I'm Sangeeta Pillai, and this is the Masala Podcast, where we talk about all those things that we're not supposed to talk about as South Asian women. Sex, sexuality, periods, menopause, mental health, nipple hair, shame, and many more taboos.
My favourite things are getting my tits out and talking shit. What a great way to start.
It's time we heard the voices of real South Asian women, not just those we see in Bollywood or in mainstream Western media. It's time we had a real voice, a loud and proud and strong voice.
I've never heard anyone say, how can he have the audacity to do that? It doesn't sound right.
It doesn't sound right.
How can she have the audacity to do that? Sounds completely different.
Absolutely.
We all know that phrase.
Absolutely. I've invited some incredible women to sit at my kitchen table, drink chai, and put the world to rights. In this very special episode of the Masala Podcast, you're going to hear where it all started, with a live recording of our launch event at Rich Mix, Shoreditch, London. I invited a panel of women who feature in the podcast to join me in front of a live audience. Hello. Welcome to the official launch of the Masala Podcast. So the journey of this podcast is about a year old. In November, I applied to a competition to Spotify and I won the competition. And just to give you context, I was on Google about a year ago typing in what is a podcast. So I wasn't exactly technically equipped. So it's been quite a journey to understand how the process works and how you create good content as well. And I think most important of all for me, how do you represent us? How do you represent our experiences, our voices? Because let's face it, there aren't many places where we talk, where it's not just, Bollywood actors or kind of the shopkeeper's wife or the terrorist's wife, which is the cliche of the brown woman. So I think it's really, really important to me that we are represented and the truth of us is represented. Our authentic experiences are represented. So the Masala Podcast felt like a really good fit with Soul Sutras, which is the platform that I run, which is all about taboos within the culture. So I do theatre, I've just launched a book, and this is the other kind of natural fit is what it feels like. So to me, it feels really important to share our stories. It feels important to give voice to our experience, I think. That's why we're here, and that's what this is all about. So let me introduce the wonderful panel. There's Asifa Lahore, who's Britain's... She clearly doesn't need any introduction. Asifa is Britain's first out Muslim drag queen. She's a TV star. She's constantly pushing the boundaries of what it means to be LGBT, South Asian, Muslim. She's been the face of Channel 4's diversity campaign, True Colour. She's incredible, Asifa. Next up, we've got Bolly, Ditz, Dolly. I can't say her name straight, so I've got to do Bolly, Ditz, Dolly every time I say it. So Bolly, in her own words, is a burlesque performer who has plenty of stories to tell and a lot of clothes to take off. Dolly's part of the House of Burlesque, and she's on the first episode of the Masala Podcast. I don't know if you've listened to it, but she's on there and she's bloody fabulous. Next up, we've got Rittika Dasgupta, who's from Cysters. Cysters is a charity that's all about removing cultural barriers around female reproductive health in the community. And we know there's a lot of that. We don't talk about periods, let alone anything more complicated than that. Next up, we've got Tina Mistry. She's a psychologist. She's a specialist in mental health issues around the South Asian community. She specializes in race and culture and identity and intergenerational trauma. Next, we've got Jane. Jane Chelliah is the star. Jane is a star of a Channel 4 documentary called Mums Make Porn. Yeah. She's had some very interesting experiences on the show. I'm sure she'll talk about it today. Jane is also an activist. She works around issues like feminist mothering and race and all sorts of wonderful things. Last but not least, we've got Famida Islam, who likes to be called Fam. Famida describes herself as queer, Bengali, and a Muslim activist. She is the co-host of London's first queer Bengali night called Udbud Queer Bangla. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Fantastic. So yeah, this is the panel, and all of these amazing, amazing women are on the podcast, so make sure you listen. So I want to kick off by asking, let's start with you, Asifa, maybe. Why do we think it's important to challenge taboos in the culture?
Wow, what a question to start with.
Start big.
Okay, I think it's important to challenge taboos within our culture because for centuries, or for as long as I can remember, I mean, I'm only 36, but for as long as I can remember, you know, a South Asian woman's place is in the home, usually the kitchen, usually, you know, if I bring a Muslim context into it, behind a veil. And women are, you know, sort of suggested to be a certain way, dress a certain way, speak in a certain manner, look a certain way, God forbid if you're dark-skinned. So I guess in a nutshell, the reason why it's really not only important, but vital for us as women to challenge the taboo in our community is because if we don't, then history is just going to continue repeating itself, generation upon generation, whether it's in South Asia, whether it's in the diaspora in the UK, in America, wherever, all the same patterns are just going to continue on and on and on. And I guess now is the time, because if the Black community can do it around Black Lives Matter, then it's about time that Asian women stood up and just were proud to be themselves. And that's simply it. For me, it's just simply take pride in being a South Asian woman. And I think that will start challenging the taboo.
Dolly, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I find that even growing up, we don't really have a chance to tell our story that much, and we definitely don't get a chance to talk about many things, like even something as simple as masturbation with each other, because everything is always centered to talking about, like you said, at home and to yourselves. And this platform is definitely a perfect way for us to come together and hear different stories and maybe explore the different kind of ways we can just come together. And we don't have to really wait for anyone else to do it. Like with you, we just jump in, and it's about time our voices were heard, I reckon.
Rittika?
Yeah, this is going to be an anecdote. So I grew up in India. Yeah, so I grew up in India, and when I first got my periods, I told my mom that I am bleeding from my vagina. So I didn't even have a word for vagina. I said, I'm bleeding from there. And I'm Bengali. So my mom said, oh, tomar shorir kharap hoyeche. So shorir kharap, translating into English, literally means illness. So there isn't a word for periods. It's called mashik, which means the monthly problem. And every time, like, I only started buying pads when I turned 18. Before that, my mom did. And when I turned 18 and I went to the shop to buy a pad for myself, they gave it to me in a black plastic bag. It is such a big taboo. Like, you cannot, like, there's not a word that exists for periods. So it's time men around us know that females bleed, people bleed, and it's normal to like go out there and buy a pad for yourself. So yeah.
And adding to that, because there's so much kind of taboo around period within the South Asian community.
Absolutely.
Whether it's in India, where you don't go to the temple, you don't cook.
You don't cook. Yeah.
What's that? Because the food's going to spoil if you.
Yeah. You don't touch a plant because the plant's going to die.
Yeah. It's just incredible in this day and age. And not just India, even in the UK, like one of the episodes is on periods, and there's Manjeet Gill, who heads a charity called Bimti, which is all about periods, and that's the work they do. She was giving me statistics. There's a lot of girls growing up here as well, where it's the same sort of thing. Because say if the family's moved, 50 years ago, it's the second generation, they bring that same value system here. So again, girls are not allowed to go into the kitchen. They're not allowed to attend weddings and things like that because they'll spoil the atmosphere.
So I live with my brother and his partner here. And when I moved here and I got my first periods, I stained the bed sheet and I had to tell my brother. And when I told my mom, I told my brother, she was shocked. She was like, how could you tell your brother you're on your periods? But I also have endometriosis and PCOS and I live with him. And for the longest time, he did not understand the problem because he did not grow up around women expressing themselves when they are on their periods. So now we talk about it. And I think we all need that space where we can talk around men about the problems we face as women on a daily basis. Yeah.
Tina, do you want to go next?
So I'm going to take it from a mental health angle, obviously. And I think that what I see day in, day out in my clinic room is all of these issues, but then they are kind of symptomized as anxiety, depression, stress. So if we dismantle what is anxiety, what is depression, what is stress, what is trauma, it's all of this stuff we're talking about. It's all of this oppression, all of this things that we have been told we have to do, but it's conflicting with us internally. So this idea of internal conflict is what causes our psyche distress. And that is what we see in our mental health systems. And these are the things that often people find it so difficult to articulate in when they see a therapist or when they see their doctor. And I think that we need to start addressing this from the top level so that we don't get to see it in the therapy room or in the GP.
Because that's where it ends up.
Exactly, that's where it ends up. Yeah.
Jane.
So I think it's really vital first to speak up because female powerlessness is actually celebrated in the Asian culture.
So true.
It's seen as being a virtue. And when I was brought up, and it still happens, right? Constantly sentences would begin, don't say that. Yeah, constantly being told what you can't say. So silence basically was the norm, and speaking up was taboo. So this is why we need to speak up, basically. Even the very act of speaking up is seen as defiance against the Asian culture. So speak up, write, break the silence, literally.
Fam?
I guess actually I share the same stories about periods. So when I was younger, I think I was about probably 9 or something, and my sister ran away from home. Well, her story is not mine to tell, but her story lives with me every single day of my life. But before she ran away from home, she actually sat me down on a chair and was like, "Okay, she made me wear like a underwears around my knees and was like, okay, so this is what you need when you start seeing some red stuff." I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Don't worry about it. I'm just going to train you what you need to do." I still was unsure about what was going on, but yeah, she taught me how to actually put it on my underwear, and yeah, is something that my mum wasn't able to teach me. And so she eventually left, and obviously the entire family was distraught, and so was I. I was left with 2 brothers. Yeah, and one day, I think I was 11 and a half or something, and I came on my period, and I said to Mum, "Okay, I think my sister actually told me about this. I think I need some of these things." And that was it. And then, and also I realized, like, you know, leg hairs and underarm hairs and pubic hair. And then, you know, my mum said, okay, I think you're around about that age now. This is what you need. It was a hair removal cream, which is probably not the best thing to put down there because, you know, then you end up with BV and everything else that you're not actually taught about. And when you're in serious pain, who do you go to? You talk to your mum about paracetamol and all that stuff. Yeah, it's just, yeah, it's quite a lot of stuff that went on in the house. And if your mum's ill, then who do you go to go to the shops? Because my mum wasn't allowing me to go out to the shops to go and buy these things. So what is it? What do you tell your brother to go get? You don't actually tell your brother to go get it. You just have to deal with tissues for the day.
Can we stay with you? And I'd love to have you speak a bit about kind of your background, being Bengali, being Muslim, being queer, and then coming out, and then also starting to do the work that you do with the group we mentioned. What's been your journey? What is the kind of big motivator? What powers you to do the work that you do?
My brother outed me to my family. He read my diary. He found my diary in my room. It was in the most secret place that I thought was really, really quite secret. And I confided in him. And he was actually the one who told me to start writing in a journal. So, you know, because I wasn't able to speak to anybody and both my sisters weren't at home and I wasn't able to speak to my mom and I was going through a lot of stuff through secondary school. Yeah, and into college, he said, start writing in your diary. And I did, but he went and found it and he told my mom and then the entire family found out and it was just awful. So ever since then, like, I mean, just generally growing up, the notion of privacy was just really hard to come by. If you lock your door, why are you locking your door? You know, and then you have your lock taken off from the door and you have to sleep with the door open, and your mum will check in on you and stuff. And it's just like, there's just, yeah. And then obviously, like, it felt really, it was in my childhood and like teenage and then growing up into adulthood was just invasive. It was just intruded on all the time. And then eventually I was basically kicked out of home. So I had to start thinking about how to just be myself and be okay with the fact that I am queer. I did go to the police actually, and then because it was an awful coming out thing. No, it wasn't even coming out; it was just exposed. It was just awful. So I went to the police, and the woman was actually Asian. She was Indian, and she said, "Have you just thought about maybe not being that?" No, I bloody haven't, because that's just it. Yeah. So yeah, that's like been my motivator since. My arsehole brother has been a massive motivation. Yeah. I mean, including my arsehole father, but that's another story.
And do you think the work that you do will help other women like you? And do you find that your story is very similar to a lot of other stories of queer women in this culture?
Yeah, I would say mainly, I guess, Sylheti Bengali Muslim. And I know this because actually when me and my mate started Odbud, the queer Bengali night, I just went all out. We both went all out with the marketing and stuff, and we just tried to spread the word as far as we could. We weren't expecting many people, but babes, there were so many people there, so many Bengalis, so many queer Bengalis. We had no idea. We were like, what the hell is going on? We thought we were the only queers. Thought we were the only queer Bengalis. People turning up in gamsas and like, wow, we were like, wow, this is amazing. But not only that was amazing, was people were reaching out to me, and I say people, but actually cis women, Bengali Sylheti Muslim particularly, were messaging me and saying, you know, really, this is amazing. I'd love to come to one of your events, but we can't come out at night. Like, I can't come out at night. Yeah, can you do a daytime event? I'm like, yes, babes, we're working on it.
You're listening to Masala Podcast live at Rich Mix in London.
Asifa, if I could come back to you. Can you talk about what powers you to do the work you do? Because you're a huge advocate. You are in events and you're on TV and you are very passionate about the cause. What was your personal journey that's brought you to this work?
Very similar to Fam. My sister actually read my diary when I was 16. And she basically said to me, don't tell mum and dad, they're not going to understand. And I just kept it to myself for like years. And I remember when she read my diary, she was 10, I was 16. And for the first time, someone in my family, or just someone anywhere actually, was voicing what I had always thought inside, which was, okay, it's wrong to be who I am. And back then I identified as a gay man. And I basically, I think every Asian person can understand this. Like, you live a double life where at home you're one thing and outside you're something totally different. And it got to a point in my early 20s where I'd forgotten who I was because I was lying so much. I was lying to hide the first lie. You know what I mean? Like, you lie so much that you forget the trail of lies. And it got to a point where I was at university and my mum found a magazine in my room. She was just, snooping around and found a magazine, and it was, a gay magazine, and she told my dad about it, and they approached me, and I had to have this whole coming out experience of some questions I had the answers for, some I didn't, some I did, but I didn't want to discuss with my mum and dad. Like, who wants to discuss like their sex life with their mum and dad? Like, in my early 20s. And I, God, I was whisked like to the GP because my mum and dad thought, okay, we don't really get what the word gay is, what it is. Is there something that, can medically be done? Because they thought maybe there was something medically wrong with me. I remember my dad, or was it my mum? No, it was my mum actually that asked me, does this mean that, you're female? Or let me say in Urdu, iska matlab hai ki tum hijra ho, right? So, and I was at that point in my life, I said, no, I'm not trans, simply because in the UK, in the late 90s, early noughties, trans visibility was like zero. Like, I saw more trans women in Pakistan and India than I ever did in the UK. And I just, because I was so bullied at school and at college for like being effeminate and for being gay, I just assumed, okay, I'm gay, I'm an effeminate gay man. So I had a massive coming out, got taken to the GP. When that didn't work out, I got taken to the masjid, spoke to the imam, and agreed to like a marriage with my first cousin in Pakistan. And 6 months into that engagement, I just fell into a massive depression, and my tutors just pulled me aside at university one day and said, what's happening? Like, you're handing in work that isn't up to your usual standard. And I just kind of burst into tears, told them what was going on, and they deferred my year. It was my final year that they deferred. And I was put in touch with like LGBT charities in central London. And very similarly to Fam, I literally, up until that point, I thought I was the only LGBT Muslim in the entire world. And when I met other, like, men, women that identified as queer, it just blew my mind. I was like, oh, okay, so I'm not on my own. There's so many other people like myself. I went back to mum and dad and I just said, look, I'm not, main shaadi nahi karunga, basically. And obviously it was my first cousin. It created a massive rift in the family. Mum and Dad never told them at the time why the engagement was breaking off, but it caused a massive rift. I then went on to enter into a marriage with my boyfriend of the time. And I was out clubbing one night and I entered a drag competition, and that spiraled into my career, basically. And it got to a point where I'm very sure that Fam gets this as well, where, you know, you're doing your club nights, you're doing your events in the queer Asian community, and you're hearing all these stories of people living double lives and, you know, people stuck in marriages or being forced into marriages, or, you know, people coming to the clubs and then suddenly going missing and never coming back. And rumors spreading about honor killings, or, you know, hearing stuff in the papers. It got to a point where, you know, as an Asian person, I have a business mind. I can either look at the money and look at all these people coming in and paying my mortgage, or I can actually do something about it. You know, I felt that I was in a privileged position where I was out to my family. I was, you know, people coming and telling me all their stories. And I just began doing documentaries with the BBC and Channel 4, and began putting like myself out there. And it was through my drag career that I realized actually it's, for me, my gender identity is much more than just performing as a woman, as an ultra feminine, you know, drag version of myself. Actually, I am female, and I came out once again as transgender 2 years ago. And my mum and dad actually accepted me being trans way more than they ever accepted me of being gay. And I don't say that as a positive thing. I think, you know, I as well as the T, I'm shouting out about the LGBT plus, you know, and I include straight people in that as well, because I'm not just I don't believe in ghettoizing an issue. But I think because my parents had cultural references to hijras, eunuchs, trans communities in South Asia. I mean, it's interesting. We're living through times where in the West, we're really struggling with transgender identities. I mean, you pick up a newspaper and you read all these weird stories about people feeling challenged by trans people. And yet, in our motherlands, it's completely legal right now to be transgender. In Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in India, Nepal, Sri Lanka, it's like completely legal. Yes, there's a lot of discrimination and there's much more social work to be done, but legally, it's absolutely fine for you to be transgender. I guess I am a woman of a certain experience, and the reason why I shout out about it is because I know that, you know, behind me or in front of me even, there are many women and people that don't have either the confidence or feel invisible, feel like their voices are not being heard or will never be heard. And I feel, you know, if we look beyond the whole queer, the whole transgender thing, I feel many Asian people living in this country today feel that they don't have a voice, or they feel that they're not being listened to. So I guess in answer to your questions, the reason why I am passionate is because the issues, although they've affected me personally, I can see that so many issues within the Asian community are affecting my sister, my mum, my dad, the local imam, the whatever. There's so many parallels to our identity that probably go way beyond even British India, you know, way before colonial at times, where we are kind of embodying all these barriers, all these obstacles, all these issues today when we really shouldn't be. So that's why I shout out about things.
Brilliant. Would you say, I think this is for all of us actually, that it's a lot harder if you come from the South Asian culture to be queer, to come out as gay, to do something different, say like Dolly, the work you do. It's almost like it's another level of difficulty on top of what is already difficult. Would you say that? Dolly?
I feel like it's every time there's like this sort of subject, it's almost like I hate to say it, but it's like coming out constantly with another, oh, so I'm bi and also I do this. And even when you get to one basis of just going to your parents and exposing your truth, then there's, like you said, the lies within the lies, because then everything has to be kind of full circle in order for you to fully have that conversation with your parents if you want that conversation.
Could you talk to us, Dolly, about how Dolly went from a nice Punjabi girl to taking her top off in burlesque clubs?
Oh, dear. Uh-oh. No. Definitely a massive body positive everything. And that's come from my kind of background of being born in Prince Regent, East London, which I pride myself on because I always go back to that as being my kind of roots. But my family in general, we were surrounded mainly by, how can I say, the only way to get Asian culture was to go to Green Street or kind of go to those certain areas and kind of find your people. But then even going there was not really an outlet for us. So I spent most of my times being scared of leaving the house because of whatever was going on outside, like racism and stuff like that. And I'd pride myself in just kind of living in my own little, I'm a little star kind of bubble. Whatever's going on outside, that's troubling, but I could come home and just, I don't know, sing or dance or act a fool and kind of celebrate myself like that. There were times when I would be mistaken for my appearance as a boy a lot more than being a female. So a lot of the times I'd kind of be reminded that I'm not a female, the way I looked, the way I presented myself. And eventually I just started going, okay, maybe this is my identity. Maybe I will keep myself like this, because it seemed to be this sort of, again, a taboo subject of, if I made myself look feminine, maybe someone would attack me, maybe someone would treat me in a different way. And the long story short, obviously, that's not the case, because it doesn't really matter what you wear or what you don't wear. I think there's a fine line between consent and what is not consent. So there were a lot of things I had to catch up quickly as a young girl. And I found my spirit in, just cliche to say, just dancing and expressing myself. And I used to go to a lot of dance classes, and they were summer schools as well, because we didn't really have like the opportunity to go to academies and stuff. And I would get whatever I could out of there and then go home and then do the exact same thing at home. Then came going to enter the sort of career world. What are you going to do with your life?
You're not going to be a doctor then?
Well, essentially, I think we kind of, by no sort of insult at all, but I feel like a lot of South Asians have their life already figured out for them by their family and say, okay, so you're going to be this sort of person, you need this career, you need to marry by the time you're 25, or else no one else is going to marry you. And it was like, well, I was failing at that. I guess I probably won't be housewife material fully, but I tried my best. And I think I was kind of privileged to have my parents be a little more understanding. We had fallouts. I think everyone has that sort of, no, Mum, I'm going to go out and I want to go see what's out there, kind of back and forth. But I felt like they were also probably going through things coming from everywhere around London to eventually going to live where we lived for about 13, 14 years or something like that. So after, I'll fast forward because I know that when I started going into uni, I wanted to do acting. And that was, again, something that was not recognized in my family. So it was a bit bizarre. It was more or less like, oh, does that mean you're going to kiss someone on stage? What are you going to do? And at this time, I had no idea about burlesque or anything. So I was just like, I'm not sure, but I want to express myself in a way that celebrates my body and makes me feel confident. And eventually, that's when I started looking at videos. I started going out to like little places like Q Bar and around Soho, and just started watching and seeing a lot more, and just kind of going, this makes me feel much better than watching a Bollywood film where female is in the middle, dancing really sexy, and all these men are sitting around just gawking at her. And I was just like, when I go to a when I see performances, I see a beautiful woman in the middle of the stage, and she's kind of being validated by other women in the crowd, and everyone's kind of got that love to give back and forth. And I think that love was lost in myself. And I kept reflecting and going, well, this is one way, the way to be the housewife, the way to be career-wise, get a career, blah, blah, blah. All this colorful, extreme, like, punk world was just calling to me. And I was just like, oh, this is so nice. I feel so comfortable in this sort of space. I feel safe, which is definitely what I lacked in different parts. Eventually, I think the first thing I did was just stand in the mirror and just give myself a good look, just completely naked, and just go, this is your body. This isn't anyone else's body. This isn't like a property of anyone's. This isn't going to get married soon or whatever. Like, this is your body, and this is what you're doing with it. Do you like what you see? And I had to trail through like top to toe of all the insecurities and everything like that till I got to a point of going, actually, I feel good despite the bullying and everything that was thrown at me. I just thought, well, I'm not going to let them win. I'm going to let my body win. So it's when I started going to House of Burlesque, and I met Tempest Rose, and we kind of just like had a one-to-one, and she basically showed me like the classicals and the sort of drag, and kind of getting on stage and just starting to reveal and starting to feel sexier within myself, because I thought, well, what's wrong with feeling sexy? Nothing. Unless if you find my sexiness to be a problem, then sorry, more or less. And eventually, I think I had a few more messages and people out there kind of telling me that they loved what I did, and they loved the expression and the sort of like the bad Betty energy that I was kind of giving, which was basically my whole body being a middle finger to anyone who ever kind of tarnished it or made me fit into this box. And ever since then, I've just kind of burst out that box any opportunity that I can. And now I'm just finding like even more like Asians who are doing burlesque, like Misty Lotus, who's all the way in Switzerland, and she messaged and said that there's not enough of us celebrating ourselves like this. We should be doing more. Like, that's my journey there.
But even that act of taking ownership of your body feels revolutionary, doesn't it? In a culture that says, actually, your body is not yours.
Yeah.
You know, that's how we're brought up as young girls. It's like, oh, you know, this body, but it doesn't belong to you. It's the husband's, or it's somebody else's, or you protect the body from someone else who's going to attack you.
Yeah.
So the act of standing in front of a mirror naked, looking at yourself and saying, oh my God, this is me, is in itself revolutionary, I think, in the culture.
It's reminding yourself to take ownership, because as women, we've kind of, even like to say arranged marriage and being put out there, it's like, this is my model daughter. She's got, I don't know, 12 A stars, and she's got this and she's got that, and I'm just there with my D's and E's just going, oh no. But that's just it. It's kind of just that, you know, taking a stance on yourself.
Tina, if I could come back to you, what's your journey been? Why the work that you do? What's brought you here?
It's a complex one, because I think that mental health affects us all. And I think it's whether we choose to see it or we don't choose to see it. And my journey was when I realized that I you know, as a teenager, I grew up with this kind of conflict that we've all sort of touched on, this dual identity, this kind of, oh, I have to wear Punjabi suits at the weekend and I feel really ashamed about that, and I have to go to the mandir and I won't tell my friends that I had to go to the mandir at the weekend. And then I would kind of slap on the makeup when I'm leaving the house, make sure my mum doesn't see how short my skirt is, and all of that. And I remember just feeling that massive wave of, I don't know who I am. Like, I'm trying to be two different people. And the feeling of like just lying to my mum, lying to my friends, and just this whole concept of not knowing who and what I am. And I'll be honest, even now as a 36-year-old, I still am figuring it out. I still haven't kind of got it down to this is who I am. I think it is a journey. And I think also the things that we experience as we grow up, you know, traumas, losses, rejections, all of those things, they affect us. And, you know, when I think about deaths, nobody sat down and said to me when my grandma passed away or my granddad passed away, how are you? Like, what we're going through, this is, you know, people cry and it's okay. All I remember was wailing and this extremity, and I was watching it and I was feeling all these feelings. And I remember a sense of like being cut off from those feelings because I didn't know how to express it. And then you're just left with all these really strong emotions. And I thought to myself, hang on, this can't be right. Surely, there's got to be words for this. And so my journey into psychology just randomly started with a Saturday morning, as you do, you know, a bowl of crunchy nut, watching Saturday morning TV, and I stumbled upon an Open University lecture back in those days on BBC Two. That's what I just watched. I was weird like that. And I saw the psychiatrist Dr. Raj Persaud talk about depression. And I was just hooked. I thought, whoa, what is this? What's he talking about? And obviously he was talking about it from a psychiatric concept of, you know, the chemicals and the hormone imbalances, all of that stuff. But I was like, whoa, this explains a lot of symptoms that I possibly connected to. But also, I saw this in my family members. I saw that people went through these sorts of things, but they never spoke about it. And I thought to myself, they've got a word for that. They're naming it. And that was then, when I was 16, I thought, right, I've got to research psychology. So I went off and researched what psychology was. I did my A-levels. I went on to do my degree, and I was hooked. I was in love with the concept of understanding the mind. And I knew then that I need to do something with this. And during my undergraduate degree, I was you know, a teenager, you know, as a young person that I remember going through feelings. And I thought to myself, what about researching South Asian people and researching conflict between first generation and second generation South Asian people? Again, when I went to do my lit research or lit review, there was nothing out there. A dearth of research. There was nothing, nobody was talking about it. It was a handful of people that were doing that stuff. And I thought, oh, this is fascinating. So maybe, like, you know, South Asian people don't have mental health, or they don't experience these things. Maybe it's not us. Which then, obviously, I was wrong, clearly, and I kind of pursued that. And then I decided to go into clinical psychology because I wanted to help people heal. That was my passion. And I thought to myself, if I can do something, if I can give something back, that's me feeling like I'm healing myself at the same time. And we talk about this idea that all therapists are wounded healers. And I think I would agree to that we're trying to heal ourselves in some sort of way because we're trying to understand our psyche, try to understand who we are. So fast forward, got my doctorate. I ended up doing my research in South Asian women and their experience of breast cancer. Again, under-researched, you know, there we go. And I left it. And I remember doing my doctorate degree. And I remember feeling massively out of place. Out of, you know, the handful, there was 15 of us. There was 2 people of colour in that cohort. And I thought, wow, that's weird. Maybe I'm just lucky or something. Or maybe that I just snuck in, you know, they have to fit a quota of ethnic minority representation or something. And as I was studying, I was learning about the concepts and the models of psychology. I thought, this doesn't fit with what brown people go through. They're talking about psyche and id and ego and cognitions and all of this stuff. And I thought, this doesn't fit right. I feel like I'm being a bit of a fraud to myself. But I carried on, being the good Indian girl that you do. You be quiet and you carry on and you pass your coursework and all of that. And I think I've always felt that there's this gap missing within our health system. I've worked in Birmingham, which is multicultural, for the NHS, and I always felt like I did a disservice to any person of colour who came to see me. I felt like I missed so much of their story because a lot of their trauma and their hurt was around racism, was around prejudice, was around, all these things that us as psychologists, we didn't really talk about. And I feel that things need to change, and we are now finally taking this seriously. We're starting to address racism within the training program itself. We are starting to address what it's like to sit in front of a person who is not of the same race, trying to heal you. What does that mean? What is white privilege? All of these concepts and ideas are finally being addressed in the context of mental health, and how the mental health is almost reinforcing or traumatizing people of color. The statistics are there, all the research is out there of how, we've got a higher representation of black men within the psychiatric system. What's that about? Why is it that, GPs are more likely to give people of color antidepressants rather than therapy? What is that about? So I think there is something about professionals and our system, which is unfortunately structurally racist in itself, that we need to start to address. And I want to be part of that movement. I want to be part of sharing what it's like to be a person of color, a brown woman, talking about psychology, and to start to integrate all of those bits together. And I want to do it in a collective. I want to do it by sharing stories about what it is to be a real person of color in this, in Britain today.
You're listening to Masala Podcast live at Rich Mix in London.
Sharing stories. I think that's the fundamental, of the work we do, the work I do, and everyone on this panel, I think. Because I think there is real power in that. So I grew up in India. I grew up in a very traditional family. I was the first woman to ever work. They were trying to get me married off when I was 21. It was just bonkers. So it felt like that fighting, that challenging is what everybody experiences in different ways. So you might grow up here, I've grown up there, you've grown up in India, but there are so many similarities to the challenges we face, whether we're trying to find our voice, whether we're trying to say, actually, that thing you're telling me, that doesn't suit me. And I feel like it's when we sit down, when we say, this thing happened to me, and then you say to me, you know what, yeah, but this other thing happened to me, and there's that connection. And that's the one thing I found on every episode of the podcast, no matter who I was speaking to. And say, Fam is much younger than I am. You've grown up in a very different kind of environment. Your references are different. But when we did the episode we did, I remember the last thing we said was like, oh my God, there's so many similarities in our experiences. So I think storytelling is not just, hey, we're telling a story. It's we're telling our truths, I think, and that's how human beings connect with one another. So I wanted to talk about what that means to each one of us. Why is it important, Asifa, to share our stories within the brown community?
Two things just came into my mind as you asked me that. One, on a selfish level, it's about a need to self-express. Because when you've been silenced for so long, or when you yourself have silenced yourself for so long because you're scared of what the community will think or, your family will think, there is this need to let it all out. Literally just, I think the coming out, whatever identity you identify as, just that first need of coming out, it's definitely a self-need where you need to get out of all these shackles that have been put on you and express who you are. And sometimes, like Tina said, it's a journey because you're constantly reevaluating, you're constantly finding new concepts and pathways within yourself, because for such a long time, I definitely confined myself for so many years. I hid myself away. So firstly, definitely that whole selfish element. Secondly, if not us, then who? What are we waiting for, I guess? Or what? I don't know. I think let me put this out there. Let me put this out there to everyone. Maybe as Asian people and maybe as Asian women, we have a savior complex where maybe a man needs to save us, or a man needs to guide us, or a man needs to, provide for us. And because we've always had that, or we've lived with that psyche, I find, unlike black women, Asian women don't have that. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to describe it, but we just don't have that power, or whatever you want to call it, to really go and do it. So I guess, I don't know if that does answer your question, is if we're not going to do it, who is? Because yes, there's a self-want to do it, a selfish reason to do it, but then there's also a reason to do it for ourselves, for each other. Before we came out, Tina said something really poignant that I found, that, as Asian women with each other, whether it's the mother-in-law and the daughter-in-law fighting against each other, whether it's, Asian neighbors in an Asian area fighting against each other, Asian women are always taught to fight against each other. We're never ever taught to support each other or raise each other up. And one of the reasons, Sangeeta, why I wanted to be part of the Masala monologues is there's nothing like this out there. I've never, when I think back to my relationship with my sister or Asian families, it's always the whole bitchiness aspect of, Asian women bitching against each other, or cousins bitching against each other. Why can't we actually all get together and actually do something bigger? So yeah, those two reasons.
I think I just wanted to add, what you said about why is it that Asian women don't speak? I think it's generations of conditioning. If you've always been taught, and your mum and your grandmom's been taught to keep quiet, to sort of never challenge, to never question, it's a really difficult thing. And the other thing I think I wanted to mention was the kind of infighting. I think, again, it comes from not having power. So if in a traditional family structure, there is, very little power given to the women. The little bit is kind of fought upon with the mother-in-law, the daughter-in-law, the sister-in-law. And I think that's in my, that's a guess.
Could I just share something that's just come up for me? Since transitioning, my relationship with my mum has obviously transformed. And very recently, my mum's in her early 60s, and she's beginning to, I don't know what the word is in English, but I'll say it in Urdu, wo jhukne lagi hai. Like when she walks, she's beginning to fall a little bit. And I'm like, Mum, she said to me recently, I know why this is happening to me. And I said, why? And she said that as a child, as a teenager in Karachi, where she grew up, she was always taught never to stand up tall, because it would सीना तान के नहीं चलो, क्योंकि breasts will be exposed. So she was always taught to literally walk with, her chest downwards, and that her posture has always been downwards. And when you're talking about generation upon generation taking this on, that just came to me is, obviously my mum now is revealing so many things to me that she wouldn't have revealed to me when I identified as male. So it's definitely, it's even beyond generations. It's cultural, it's colonial, it transcends so many things before us, and yet we're still carrying all those things that are centuries old, and we're here in the UK doing that.
Rittika, if I could come back to you. What is the importance of sharing stories within the work that you do?
Yeah,
because that's critical, isn't it?
I actually wanted to talk about oral narratives in the South Asian culture. It's age old. Even our epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, they came down through oral narratives. So oppression that women face, we actually do share it amongst each other, but it's all oral and it's all hidden. It's not out there in the world. So if we look at the Me Too movement, when it started in India, so all the molesters that came out, they already existed within the oral narratives among women, female communities, all the people who were molested. So it's always existed. And when it comes to periods, again, oral narratives, we speak, but then again, it's within us. It doesn't really come out. And big shout out to Neelam Hira, who started Cysters on Facebook. It's a group which brings ethnic minorities together to speak about periods, which we can't actually with our families. So we speak about the problems we face on a daily basis. So I came from India and I got diagnosed with endometriosis. And it took me like a year to get diagnosed here. And every time I went to the doctor, they said, oh, you're pregnant with all your symptoms. They never really checked me. And then finally I got a female gynecologist. She did an invasive check and she told me I had it. And back in India, like I wasn't even checked because they don't do invasive checks. I just got my ultrasonography from on the top of my belly. So they will not go inside you and take away your virginity. So, yeah, the doctor won't do it.
Marry you then?
It's for the husband.
Jane, if I could come to you next. Why is it important to share our stories?
It's really important to share our stories because we have a kinship that has never been given an airing. So I'm 56, right? I've been in this country for 38 years. And for the first time, I actually have goosebumps because for the first time I am sharing such intimate experiences with a group of like-minded, same-race women. Now, this is an entirely new experience for somebody my age because it's, growing up. Okay, so I'm going to take you back 45 years ago when I fancied Donny Osmond. How many of you here even know who Donny Osmond is? Who is that? I went to see him perform in Vegas last year on a bucket list. Last month, on a bucket list, right? So when I fancied Donny Osmond 45 years ago, I was seen as being a really bad girl. And he was a pop star. I mean, come on, I was never going to be able to meet him. But that gives you the context within which I grew up, right? So our sexuality was completely, it had to be buried. And when I say sexuality, I don't mean the act of having sex. I also take it in approach it in a holistic way. So it's how you dress, what you think, what you say. I couldn't, I had to be careful couldn't wear something beyond a certain length, what I said, what I thought. My whole growing up was censored, basically. And then I came to this country and there was no one to share an experience with because this was the early 80s, right? So it was, quite understandably, it was white normative, right? Thatcher was in power, first female prime minister, and racism was totally acceptable. It was completely acceptable. There would be times when we would have to stay indoors because the National Front was marching. Our voices were never heard. So even though I left all that culture and came to another culture, I was still being silenced politically. So what we do is also political, by the way. The personal is definitely political. So fast forward, 10 years ago, I started a blog. And do you know how hard it is as an Asian woman to be heard in the blogosphere, which is dominated again, by women whose experiences you don't have overlaps with. And then I had my daughter at the age of 40. I don't mean to take you through every year of my life. It's just the milestones, by the way. And then I had my daughter at the age of 36, and I thought, you know what, bloody hell, becoming a mother isn't just an activity where you change the nappy and you feed the bottle, give the baby the bottle. It's more than that. And where am I going to draw this inner strength from? I have this mixed race child who's half white, half Indian. And it was then I started to think, no, even if on my own, I have got to reach deep down somewhere. So I started looking into mother literature, academics around the world who were writing about motherhood. And from there, I was able to draw on my race and start forming stories and start telling these stories, even though people were hardly interested. But that was my blog. I used it. That was my voice. My written word was my voice. And then along came the opportunity last year to star in Mums Make Porn. And friends and family said to me, you're going to bring shame on the family. People will spit at you on the streets. And I thought, you know what? I don't care. I'll spit back. And, and thank you. And at the age of 55, I finally was given a platform. And I was going to smash it. And I was going to try and raise a conversation about female sexuality. And I have, and that's why I'm sitting here. We've been silenced for too long. But you know what is also really heartening? I get stopped by white mothers, white women all the time who recognize me on the tube, blah, blah, blah. And they say, thank you so much for speaking up about porn and what it does and how it negatively impacts on all of us. So I now understand that there's overlaps between our feminism and white feminism as well. And, it's just heartening. It really is.
Thank you. That's amazing, actually. The other question I wanted to kind of throw open to the panel is, the power of the collective, which sounds really kind of big and weighty, but even now, us sitting in the dressing room, the conversation we just had, that power of that is incredible. It's almost like each of us with our little kind of voices and experiences, but you put us together and it's somehow 1,000-fold. And it's a thing, you feel it. And I think that's the power of kind of coming together. I wondered if you had any thoughts on what that means for us as brown women, as South Asian women, when we put our kind of, might behind it. What do you think that changes? What happens?
I guess what I think about when I'm just thinking about this in a professional context, when I see somebody and they talk to me about their experience, their story, and then when they start to talk about their experience openly, be it that they've experienced trauma or depression or whatever it is, and then they start sharing that story, or they've been to a group, or they find a forum, and it's that whole concept of, I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only one who's felt this way. That is empowering, because what we're talking about is a shared narrative. And, it's about this idea that actually we're not alone. And when we, most of the time when we think about our experiences, we think we're the only person. You guys have touched on it, this idea that, I was the only one. But actually, we have so much more in common than we realize. And yes, we have, differences, and we should celebrate our differences, but also celebrate what we do share. And I think that when we come together, and as you were talking, and this idea of collectivist culture is what is traditionally known in the South Asian communities. Oh, you guys have lots of support because there's loads of you, right? Actually, that's not always the case. Often we find that even though we come from these ideas of, collectivist cultures, and we have lots of people around us, the ideas, the ideologies or the values, they're not shared. So actually what we need to be doing is reaching out and creating our own kind of villages, as I call them, and in relation to kind of mothering and motherhood, is we want to create villages where we are sharing our values. And by doing that, we can then create a platform to actually feel safer. Because I think that, when you talked about the idea of safety, we thrive in a safe space.
Absolutely. And I think when we do what we're doing here and on the podcast and in kind of other mediums, when we find those common stories and commonalities and we connect, it's almost like creating families. Because a lot of us, I think, we're kind of outliers within the culture. We've all said, I'm not doing this thing. I'm going to go off and do this other thing, which brings with it quite a lot of loneliness, I think, because I'm not getting married, having children, whatever the traditional way is for a South Asian woman. But when you do this, that sense of loneliness kind of goes away, and you sit and you have these conversations, and Fam and Tina and all of us, and you're like, oh my God, yes. And there's that connection, I think, and that is the power of the work we do, I think. And that actually is why I loved podcasting. And it is that where you sit across, you connect, and you really open up to each other and you're honest and you're truthful, and you can hear that. You can't make that stuff up. Thank you so much.
I'm Sangeeta Pillai. Thank you for listening to the Masala Podcast.
It was amazing. It was amazing. I loved the panel. I loved how real and authentic they were.
Brilliant. That's the only word I can give you.
As a young South Asian woman, it was very empowering because the stories that have come out of the women on the panels, they're incredible. And the fact that they've gone through that and they have the courage to speak out about it. I have lots of things that I have inside me that I don't have the courage to speak about yet. But hearing it from these people on the panel, it definitely gives you more confidence.
I think the Masala podcast is something I've been missing all my life, and I'm so happy that there's finally something I can listen to and go, right, I'm not alone. So thank you.
Masala Podcast is part of my platform Soul Sutras. What's that all about? Soul Sutras is a network for South Asian women. A safe space to tell our stories. A place to reclaim our bodies. To tackle taboos within our culture. To be exactly who we want to be. Get in touch and tell me your stories about your taboos. Check out my website, soulsutras.co.uk, or get in touch via email at soulsutras.co.uk. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Just look for Soul Sutras. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe and leave me a nice review. It really helps.